Hey guys, it's Jake again.
And this is Eric.
Very suspiciously wearing exactly the same clothes as the last video. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
I did laundry real quick before we started the second one.
All right. So what we're going to talk about now, we're not going to talk about pedals. I can't promise that. We'll talk about pedals at some point. They're going to come up at some point. Well, we're going to talk about pentatonics. So I know a lot of my students lately have been working on pentatonics because I've been forcing them to do so. And I wanted to talk to Eric and see if he had any pentatonic exercises or any theories about ways that we can teach pentatonics more effectively. So hopefully you guys will get some cool ideas about ways that you can practice and or learn and use pentatonics on your own. So Eric, anything specific that you do to teach pentatonics to your students?
So whenever I start off with pentatonic stuff, it's always usually tagged along with showing them about blues. As most of you probably know, blues being a style of music kind of runs hand in hand with pentatonics. Like if you know your three basic blues chords for a blues progression, you could apply the same key pentatonic scale that you're in for the chords, and you can pretty much solo over the progression the entire time using that one scale. And while there's a lot of variations that you can do to both the chord progression and your scale, it's always, I stand by it, it's super important to know your basic scale, right? And being in the key of A, that's just your basic 5 notes in 5th position on the neck. There's a lot to be said with knowing that up and down with your eyes closed, in your sleep, anything like that, right? Fancy stuff can come later on. If you don't have that basic scale, then you're not going to get much further than that unless you really have that fundamental down. So that's always what I like to start off with. It might be the obvious choice for you and me, but it stands with the idea that, you kind of do this thing up and down, and it can be boring sometimes. So move it. Because with no open strings, you can put it anywhere you want. And it's also noted that at that point, you can talk from not so much from a fret number standpoint, but a finger pattern standpoint too. As many of you might know, the playing guitar is much more of a physical thing than anything else. And you can kind of take the same ideas in one spot and apply it to a different spot too. So.
And then, so that'll change the key, right? So if you're playing a blues in A, for instance, then you can just use that A minor pentatonic scale there. Then if you're playing a blues in G, for example, you would just move down to a G minor pentatonic scale.
Right. Yeah. With little to no effort in terms of your musical knowledge or understanding about how chords work or scales work, just take the same thing and move it 2 frets down, and you can play a bunch of other songs in that key. And it's just, it's that simple sometimes.
Yeah. That's exactly how I learned, actually. So when I was a kid, because YouTube was invented the same year I started playing or something. So when I was a kid, there was no
That's wild.
You couldn't go on. I know, right?
Are we showing our age with that?
Really old. I don't know if you realize this. And so I couldn't just go on YouTube and find a backing track to play with because it wasn't a thing yet. So I had a CD that had tracks on it. One of them was called Gee Whiz, and it was and 3 minutes in, I was like, okay, it's called Gee Whiz, so I guess that's probably in G, and I think this note is G, so I'll play this scale.
All it is.
A lot of that. Yep. That's pretty much what I did. And I just knew that one scale shape, and I just tried, soloing one in just out of that one shape. But let's say you wanted to add some additional things to that, because one thing I found is that, yes, you can just use that one shape, but most good guitar players, let's leave ourselves out of the equation here for a second. Let's people that are good at the instrument, they will move around through some different pentatonic positions a little bit more, right? I don't often just hear these great guitar players just going for a whole solo. They're definitely part of it. But now what if we wanted to do the...
Right, you're basically taking it. You're basically taking it from one spot and weaving the needle through into a different spot around the neck and keeping all the notes the same. That's cool.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I have my students do pretty much from the get-go these days is, they start with that scale position there. But then I'll also ask them to do the other ones and kind of like each week add a different scale shape. And the series of exercises that I have them do is like take, for example, this pentatonic shape and start there, play up that one, and then shift to the next one and come down that.
Yeah.
Kind of weave around a little bit. That's one part of the exercise. The other part of the exercise is to take those, starting with just those two shapes, and to go 4 notes from one shape and then 4 notes from the other, like all the way through. And then also do the same thing, but reverse the order of the second note, the second group of notes. So like,
right. And you're in the same key the whole time, obviously.
You're in the key of A minor the whole time. So one thing that's kind of interesting is that you can either take one scale shape, like for example, you just take this, and you could play that in every key. You learn that in every key, and I think that's kind of how I did it. Because I didn't really know there was more than that.
Right.
You could take that one scale shape and learn that in every key, and learn to solo in every key, or you can take one key and learn all of the scale shapes that go in that one key. And when you finally get to the end of it, you learn, all the same information. So I guess it's just a matter of either what practically you might need because of whatever kind of music you're playing or what songs you're playing. Maybe you don't need this scale shape. Maybe you never need to use that. Right. So in that case, maybe you just want to use this. Or if you're playing music that's a little more adventurous, so you want to learn the neck a little bit better, it can be helpful, I think, to learn all those different scale shapes and see how they connect.
That's cool. Another thing that I like to kind of do sometimes is like, because a lot of times, maybe you get this too, like I always get the question, like, so the big question is why?
Yeah.
And like, okay, so let's talk about that for a second. Why? Well, because another thing, going back to the blues aspect of it, a big part of blues, of course, is improvisation, right? Taking solos. And like, I never discovered how tricky it was to define, like, because people are like, what's a solo? It's like, I have no idea how to answer that. Like, what do you mean, what's a solo? So like, and I'm going to say, I'm going to play the chords, use that scale however you want, and just come up with whatever you can. And a lot of the times I just get this. Like they just kind of go back and forth. I'm like, okay, so let's break this down a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll have them pick a single note from the scale. It always has to be from the scale shape.
Yeah.
And it's like, so pick a single note. Great. Mm-hmm. We run through it, and they can only use that one note. Play it a lot. Play it really slow. Play it really fast. Do whatever you can with it. And then by the end, I'm like, it's pretty boring, right? Like, yeah. Like, okay, so pick a second note. Preferably one that's nearby, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And they'll kind of do that. So now go in between two notes. So instead of being where am I at? I'm at the D chord. So like, so, and you can kind of, once you kind of get more familiar with that, you can start to apply certain notes to the certain chords, and that comes later. But like, it's really good to be comfortable moving around however you want. Like, you can bend this note, you can slide up to that note. It doesn't have to be because sometimes I think, and we were talking about this earlier, sometimes practicing your scales can feel very rigid.
Yeah.
So it's good to be able to break away from that. And it can be in the most simplistic way you can think of, playing a single note as much as you can. Yeah. And trying to make it as interesting as you can with it only being that single note. So that's always something fun too. And then, I also like to do a call and response thing. So like if I'll face like this way so they can't see the neck or whatever, and I'll be like, okay, so we're going to start here. And I'm like, find that note. And a lot of times I get like, like, we'll try again. Is that higher or lower, et cetera, et cetera. So a call and response way is a great way to kind of use your ears for pentatonics as well. Because it's a very familiar sound if you've played it enough,
Yeah.
And getting used to what those notes sound like, that and the minor third to me is the dead giveaway. Like that's always been like, it's always been that like go-to sound that means like I'm definitely playing a pentatonic.
Yeah, and in that case, one thing I'm noticing you're doing there is when you're playing that minor third, we're taking that first note, the third note there, and it looks like you're bending it up a little bit there, right? Yep. So that's definitely a blues kind of thing, right? Because it's weird, and I get this question all the time, and I'm pretty sure I've asked this question lots of times. Like, wait, I'm playing an A minor pentatonic, but it's a major chord. How come I can do that? And the answer is always, it's because it's the blues. You can do that.
It's because it's just what they've done it since day one. Just do it.
Yeah, exactly. But so if you were to play that note, and a lot of guitar players will do this without even realizing that they're doing it, just because your ears start to take over. If you're playing, if this is the chord that's happening, or make it dominant, and you play this note, that might seem a little bit harsh against that. It's like, that's the sharp 9.
Yeah.
So what a lot of people do is just instinctively they'll kind of, and they'll bend it up to either close to or maybe all the way up to that C sharp, which is the next note. And it gets a little more of this kind of, but if you just play this, it's fine too, but it's not bluesy. But if you play this, that's killing me to not bend that note right there. It's just like, But if you do kind of the in between where you know, just much more natural sounding.
And that kind of brings us very nicely into, so a lot of times when people talk about pentatonics, we always are just assuming we're talking about the minor. A major pentatonic is equally as important, and arguably this day and age, very commonly seen in a lot of modern popular music, particularly modern country music. Relies heavily on the sounds of a major pentatonic, the 5 notes of a minor, of course, being the root, the minor third, the fourth, the fifth, and then the minor seventh. In a major pentatonic, we have the 1, the 2, the 3, major 3, that is, and then the 5, and then the 6. So it's a little bit of a different scale just from the beginning, without any notes being different. So you get that sound like an E major. It's like home base for me. Like,
now wait a minute, I got a question for you here. I got a question for you. So we're playing pentatonic scales here. How come for the minor, like we just kind of went in one position like that, but then you were like, should be a G sharp, not an A. How come?
It's because, so you know what it is too, and I like to kind of talk about this too. It's all practical application for me. You know how many times I've had to do E major pentatonic licks, like over some sort of musical, like it's like tying a shoe. Really, like when it comes to that, minor pentatonics to me, I don't play blues like in a practical setting a whole lot, especially right now. And like I feel almost like exposed when I'm playing minor for some reason.
Interesting, because as some of our more theoretically inclined viewers might know, E major pentatonic is exactly the same set of notes as C sharp minor pentatonic.
Right. And if you ask me to play C sharp minor pentatonic, I'd just probably play E major.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people do that. So like, it's funny because if you say, hey, play E major pentatonic, my first thought is to go, that position there, whereas somebody more familiar with the country thing, more kind of down in that area there.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So a quick little a little helpful tip for finding where those pentatonics are the same. If you take that pentatonic shape that we played before, the minor from the root, we'll do it. I'll do it back in. We'll start at the 9th fret here, which gives us C sharp. So this is C sharp minor pentatonic because my first finger is on a C sharp. Whatever note your pinky is on in that same position is going to give you the major equivalent of that, right? So it's called the relative major. So if this note here is an E. That gives me my E major pentatonic. Yep.
So you don't even have to do any work. You don't even have to learn 2 scales.
Nope.
You can learn the same scale and just apply it to different spots. And then if you change the keys, like, well, I only know it in A and C. So why don't we just go there? And look at that, I'm in E.
There you go. Yeah, and that's exactly what I did when I first started out. Like especially when I was doing like some of the blues stuff for early, improvising lessons, things like that. Okay, so I'm playing like this. And somebody told me you can play G minor pentatonic over that. Oh, okay, great. So that's this one. Cool. But then somebody else comes along and say, you can actually play G major pentatonic on that too. I'm like, ugh, how do we do that? Well, okay, there's a G, so here's G major. So I did a lot of
It looks impressive.
So now that's actually where I think learning a few of the other positions can come in really handy. So for instance, let's say we're doing like a blues progression, or it doesn't even have to be blues. We're just going 1 to a 4, right? So you're going an A chord to a D chord. And we'll keep it minor just to keep kind of simple here. So the A minor pentatonic, we've got this one right here. If the next chord we're playing is D minor pentatonic, a D minor chord here, we could use a D minor pentatonic on that chord. So my first instinct, ages ago, it was to, okay, well, here's a D note, so here's my D minor pentatonic.
Yeah,
so D minor here and D minor here, which is fine, but it can sound a little disjointed. Like it can sound like I'm on this chord. Okay, now I'm on this chord. Now I'm on this chord. There's a D minor pentatonic shape that actually lives right here in that same area, which right. So now you can do things like here's your A minor and then D minor, which by the way, they're only actually one note different, which is
right.
Really interesting. The D minor's here and the A minor's. And then, of course, we can get into combining the scales and things like that, too.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of people who, they go to great lengths to avoid playing a single scale all the time. You try to move around and play to the chord a little bit more. And that's, I think, and we talk about style, that's moving away from blues a little bit, because blues is very much, the one scale can cover anything you need, more or less. And when you start moving away from that, you get more into, the jazz feel and anything like that.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into a more of a, more contemporary kind of genre, something you might see on a gig. Let's say you're playing a country gig and you've got a section you have to solo over, and it's just a G chord to a C chord.
Okay.
So you got for 45 minutes. What are you gonna do on that?
So instantly what's going through my head is I like to think about all the important notes that I'm going to need to make sure I sound like I'm playing along with the right chord. So in this case, you said a G and a C. Yeah. So I'm thinking of all the notes I need for a G chord and all the notes I need for a C chord, which really turns into 6 notes in total. The 1, 3, 5 of G and the 1, 3, 5 of C. It's a wonderful place to start. Leaving out scales and things like that for just a second, that leaves me with whatever it is. And it can be anywhere. And then you have and that's using the same pattern in some spot. You can do, and you can do them anywhere you want. You can get super close with them, meaning in a 3 or 4 fret span, or you can move them all over the place. From there, it sort of depends on what I want to achieve. And I think that's a little bit of discovering what you like to do as a guitar player yourself, from an individual standpoint. Also playing to the sound. If it's a country gig, like you said, I might stay away from the minor pentatonic a little bit more, just because it's stylistically not as common as the major pentatonic. So then I'm telling myself, okay, my one chord is a G, so why don't I start with a G major pentatonic sound, which is really just, so I have 5 notes right there that are close together and in the area in which I like to kind of do lead stuff. I'm probably not going to be soloing down here all the time, and I'm not going to be up here all the time. I like to be somewhere in the middle where you can hear it and it's still kind of peeking through just enough. So, and then right there, you kind of land on your C and you can think of the same thing. Whatever it is. And by accident, you sometimes might even go into those minor pentatonic sounds without even realizing it. Something like that. So I think to answer the question more directly, it's really just a matter of understanding where you are from a chord by chord basis, and just generally what you like to sound like. You need all the notes as your ingredients, if you will. And yeah, I guess knowing licks, we've talked about that before. If you know a couple of licks here and there just to get you from one spot to the next, that's right. Okay. That's great. Anything you need to sort of make things interesting, you kind of figure it out as you go along, I think. And if there is such thing as playing too much, most certainly. Let those notes. Like, it doesn't have to be anything crazy, because and you can probably answer this, you know what I'm talking about. Like, as much as I like to disbelieve it, the guitar player isn't the most important person on the stage all the time, unless it's your gig. So, that's one thing, but like, it's very, I'm a team player, in that sense. And yep. I think that's what makes you a very aggressive player, in the sense that you know when to play out, and more importantly, when not to play out. Yep. So all the licks and all this stuff, they're great when they're needed, and when they're not needed, don't do them.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, all this stuff we're talking about soloing and stuff like that, this is a solid 6% of a gig. I think that like 94% of the gig is just whatever it might be.
You don't make money past the 7th fret.
And exactly. Yeah. This stuff up here, you don't actually get paid if you go past. It's like a union thing. They don't.
Like, nobody cares. Nobody actually cares.
No, not at all. You got 2 guitar players in the audience that have been waiting for that moment all night.
Yeah.
It's so funny. So for me, the first thing that I go to is if I have to play like a G to a C, like I'm kind of thinking of this G major pentatonic here. Either that one or maybe this one here. And then with those 2 particular chords, G and C, there's actually only one note that's different between those 2 scales. It was just like when we had the A minor and the D minor pentatonic. So like this one here, here's the G major. And then here's the C major. So the G major has this note, the C major has this one, same thing in the second octave. So I might kind of do something like if I'm playing over a G, just kind of emphasize that one note that's different,
right?
Over the chord change to kind of just accentuate that change a little bit more. But yeah, I think in large part, I think most of us kind of approach this in a similar way, even though we might have different, we might be thinking about it differently.
So that's a big part of it. Like what our brain is making sense of the situation.
Yeah.
I'm in the key of G. What can I do? Well, I could use the key. Like you said, there's only one note difference between G and C. And chances are, another important thing that we could probably talk about another time is how important these chords actually are in the grand scheme of the entire, like a song. 4 or 5 most important chords that you're going to see all the time. Chances are there's not a whole lot of difference from one to the next. And in this case, you're right. There's only one note. So even if you messed up, you could probably easily justify it or fix it, if you will, relatively quickly, because those notes they're very much used with both chords. And you can, and sometimes a mistake is what you need to sort of like be like, oh, I didn't hear that before. Maybe I could do this correctly and make it sound better. Like I see that a lot when you're trying to utilize the major 7. If you're trying to use the 7th note of the scale, there are ways to do it and ways that don't really work out as well.
Right.
So when you hear because the big thing is when you want to like land on so in the G to the C example, that's a great G line, wonderful. And then like you do it again, and you kind of get this sound, which is cool, but might not be right for the song. You know, it might not. You might like if it's an indie gig, we'll talk. But like, Brian probably isn't using any sharp 11 chords.
Probably not.
So I might accidentally land on that F sharp going into the C chord, and I'm just like, I'm gonna bend it up a little bit. Just get it.
Exactly.
And so there are certain notes that can work out great, and there are other notes that make you work a little bit more. And I'm a huge advocate for the idea that mistakes are okay, and because they're definitely going to happen, and it's how well you can recover from them.
Yeah.
But I think part of the recovering process is understanding what's going on. And that's really just using your ears and getting used to it.
Exactly. And in that same kind of vein there, like that one note. The difference between the G major pentatonic and C major pentatonic, the G major pentatonic has that B note, which happens to be the major 7th on C. So you would probably get that same kind of thing if you're playing through. Here's G.
Right.
Even right there, you just get that works.
Yeah.
And it was kind of just like, oh, I played a B. I didn't like the way that sounded. I'm going to push that this way.
Right. Exactly. And
it works out okay.
you got really close.
Yeah.
You try it again, and then you land on the C instead of the B, and then there you go. You just made your own lick.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that actually can work. Like, just because something maybe isn't the way you wanted it to, initially thought it would sound, doesn't necessarily mean that it sounds bad to the listener. Like, this chord here sounds pretty good, and that's what you would get if you just played a C chord and added that note on the top. Right. So, the listener might be perfectly fine with hearing that note there. So the fact that you went, maybe just kind of, it probably landed perfectly fine. So that's usually what I find too, is I'll leave a gig and be like, I messed up that solo so bad. And everybody in the audience is like, dude, it sounded killer. It's like,
yeah,
it's never.
We're our own worst enemy.
Oh, 100 times over. Yeah. Well, I've had a couple teachers that maybe fit, that there may be worse enemies than we are, but for the most part, you know who I'm thinking of.
I do.
He's never going to watch this video, but we know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Does he even get the internet? I doubt it. They didn't have the internet in 1935, which I think is where he still lives. Anyway.
Yeah, it could be.
It's fine. So, anyway. Oh, one other thing I wanted to ask you about too is, so, for most guitar players, when they're talking about pentatonics, they're talking about scales that are 2 notes per string. Do you ever go into the 3 note per string, and or like one of the things that I've examined a little bit is like the 3 and 1 kind of thing? So, or if you do 2 on the first string. So I really like the top part of that, because so instead of playing, we'll just deal with that E minor and or G major pentatonic for a sec. The top 3 strings of it, normally we'd play that here.
Yep.
So one thing is tricky about that, if you're alternate picking those, you have to kind of slant the pick down this way, and you have to do down, up, down, up, down, up on each string. And then when you reverse it, it's a little bit tricky, because in order to get the pick to cooperate, you'd have to do 2 things. Either you'd have to double pick this top note to make it so that you could adequately get back there,
right. Or you can
or you can do that. However, if you take this B note and instead of playing it there, you play it here. Yeah, so now instead of, we have, now you can do down, up, down on that, and then you can sweep to the first, through the second string to the first. And to me, I don't know if I can quite, I can kind of get it if I do the alternate picking, but it sounds kind of messy, whereas if I go, it tends to be a little bit cleaner and a little bit more reliable.
That's cool.
Yeah, it takes getting used to, especially if you don't do the sweeping thing a lot. I went through a phase in my life, as most of us did, where I went, for like 6 hours a day. So I still have some of those chops left. And if you play it fast enough, you can't hear the notes that you miss in the middle.
Yeah, sweeping's never been in my back pocket, unfortunately. But I also hit C sharp notes when I don't need to. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I've never really done. I like that 3 and 1 idea, though. Maybe I'll sit with that for a little bit.
It's that was the thing. I swiped that from Frank Gambale, like 100%. And he actually in his book, it's called I think it's called Speed Picking is the name of the book. He has a whole pentatonic section, and he actually does it. He starts with 2 notes on the 6th string, but you do an up down, and then it's 3 1 to the end there. So it's up down, which sweep now to the next string, and then it's down up down 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 up down 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 up.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
More of picking efficient than.
That's a lot more efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, I was working on a way to try to do like so. You probably heard this pattern now, right? That's like
is that the 4th one? Like every 4 notes or something like that?
It's basically
Oh, okay.
So it's this little like neighbor tone kind of pattern.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting way that I found to pick it because I would always get through part of that and I'd feel like my pick was starting to trip. I could do a little bit of it. But it never really felt comfortable. So this way I do, that's actually, like that. So I played the A here the first time, but then here the second time. But now on the second string of the pattern, you can't do the same thing. You actually have to play the whole pattern on one string. So you get, and then it, so
that's cool.
Get a chance to practice it, it can kind of burn a little bit more. But it's the same basic philosophy as that. I'm working to be able to try to get the whole scale like that. It's coming slowly. Eventually, it'll get there.
There's a pattern that I checked out at one point. I'm not fast with it, but like basically what you do is you do 4 notes, right, and then you drop back down to the note. So E minor pentatonic, just your basic shape, right? So you have that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yep.
And then, so the only thing that's kind of weird is sometimes you have to do like a bar on your first finger. So it gets a little weird when you get like faster with it because it's a little awkward in some spots. And then I think there's one way you can do 5 notes. So it's like, and then you go back down. I used to be better at it, but that's another cool one too. I think I saw Josh Smith was talking about that at one point.
Yeah, I've done a few of those. I had a teacher for a while who had me do a lot of those same kind of things. So it was like that would be the 4s and then the 5s pattern there. And what was weird about it was I had to count out loud the beat that I was on while I did it. So the 4s was easy. It was like 1, 2, 3, 4. But then the 5, 1, 2, 3. That gets crazy.
Yeah,
the issue for me on those has always been the picking, because it, like, if you do 5 notes, now I just did a downstroke on this note. Now I have to reverse course and do an upstroke here. Skipping lower strings, that's really tricky. So it's good exercise for that. But I've wondered about doing things like because now I still have to go back, but I'm only have to jump over one string.
Yeah, you can do that.
No, it doesn't work. But anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah,
there's a
lot to unpack. I mean, and it's almost like you can make up your own way of approaching it too. Like it's great to have resources to check out too, and like there's a lot to find. Even with the pentatonic, like you can apply this to any scale, really, but like it's so great with a pentatonic because it's something that's used a lot, and it's something that's, I don't want to use the word easy, but it's simplistic in its approach because you're only working with 5 notes, and the patterns are a little bit more block-esque, more so than like some of the major and the minors, which can get a little bit more fancier with their patterns themselves. The other one that kind of comes to mind when we talk about more than 2 strings, of course, is when a variation on the pentatonic is when you do, of course, the blues scale, adding in the flat 5.
Right.
I don't do a lot of exercises with the flat 5, but I've always loved the sound of it. I've just never really utilized it from a practical standpoint because sometimes it can sound super weird if it's not like a Cream song.
I think a lot of the guys, like, it's funny. I have this conversation with students a lot when we learn about the blues scale, because they'll come back. I'll do this thing with the pentatonic when people learn about it the first time, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to play a pentatonic solo, and I'm going to try to make it sound bad. You try to sound bad, and you get something like. And like, you can't sound wrong with it, right?
No, you really can't.
It sounds fine. When you do the blues scale in the same way, you can sound weird. And I think that it's kind of funny that it's a whole scale, because I think like most blues guys, take Stevie Ray or take whoever you want. I don't think they're doing those kind of things. That flat 5 is just an addition that they'll do like that, or like rather than
it's way more of like a passing fancy than it is like I'm definitely going to play the flat 5 on this line.
Exactly. So I think it's interesting that it's considered a scale, because I think it's a blues scale really should, to me anyway, be more, it's a minor pentatonic scale, and every once in a while you toss in this note. Right. Or this one. The only other time I've seen that work where it's really scale oriented and not so much a passing tone thing is this. I call it the Dorian blues scale, and you see like Ritchie Blackmore does it quite a lot. Basically, what happens is you take your minor pentatonic and you fill in a gap. Every string, you put a third note on every string, whether it wants it or not. So you get. And if you look at those top 3 strings, you end up with the blues scale. And then these 2 notes here, we won't get into it too much, but those make it into a Dorian. Those 2 notes belong to the Dorian scale. So if you listen to like Highway Star, for example, he goes, there it is there. Or in Smoke on the Water, you see it there. So it's got the
definitely has that. It's a lot more properly minor.
Yeah, definitely.
You can hear that
for sure. So like, I mean, on those instances, it kind of works, but I think it only works well there because it's part of a sequence. Like that, kind of makes a little bit more musical sense than if I just went. Yeah, it's a little more. Not that it's bad because the diminished fifth can be really cool, but it's definitely more striking. It's like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah, it's and sometimes that could be what you want to go for.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool.
Very cool. All right, I think we have rambled on quite a bit. This has been great, lots of fun. But I think that's probably good on this particular topic. So I'm sure we'll. The way this is going to work is as soon as we stop recording, we'll both have 20 more ideas for pentatonic things.
Yeah. I should have talked about this.
Yeah, completely. So we'll have to do a part 2 of this, or part 3 or 4 or 5 at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Basically, I think the long and the short of it, guys, learn your pentatonic scales. Learn at least that root position scale. Maybe learn a couple more, and then if you're really ambitious, try learning all 5. And knowing a little bit of theory, just a little bit, can be super helpful. And also just knowing where a few of those notes are on the neck is like insane. Like to Eric and I, we forget about that sometimes because the notes on the neck is just completely secondary to us at this point. Like we don't need to think about like, this is a C sharp. We don't have to think about that anymore.
Right. So I always tell people it's a great idea to be able to do the same job in multiple places, at least 2, preferably 3. Yeah. But like if you can do the same exact thing in more than one spot, you're like 40% of the way there already. Yeah. So it's super important to know where all of your locations are for anything you might need. And something like a pentatonic is a great way to start that because it is only 5 notes and you can kind of see it's very much, the guitar is laid out in such a way that makes it very easy to notice what's going on if you're paying enough attention. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just to quickly kind of talk about what he was. We said we were done. I don't know. I'm still talking. But I'm gonna do this anyway. So here, for example, is a little 4-note pentatonic shape. And then if I took that same thing here, it would look like this. And here,
right, move a little bit.
Yeah, and you could even go. Yeah, that's on a 3-note. That's
because you have 24 frets.
No, 24. That's 22 up there.
Oh, 22, okay.
No. So that's the same 4 notes, but just played in several different places. One of the solos that I often mention this kind of thing with to my students is the Back in Black solo. So there's a section of that where it goes. And what's kind of funny about that is you can play I played those 3 licks all in different places, but you can actually play all 3 of those licks in the same place. So like, that's a blues note there, by the way. And then the could also be here. And I think you could,
that's a great. I noticed that that's a big Hendrix lick too. The whole, like that whole bend up to the flat side.
Exactly.
It's a great and even getting the 2 strings on the top. Holding them out and anything like that. Like this, you'll notice if you study enough of them, patterns repeat themselves.
Yeah, and I tell the students all that that same thing all the time. Like, there's how come you can learn that solo in like one lesson? It's because all the licks that are in that solo, I've played them all at various times or something similar to it. If you play 100 different rock solos, like you will have played most of the rock licks, at least the basic ones, and that just kind of leaves the ones that are unique to that particular. That specific solo or artist or whatever it is. But the more you learn and the more pentatonics or the better you know your pentatonic scales, the easier it is to just kind of play those naturally. Like if I'm doing like I'm not having to think about where those notes are because that scale position has been practiced so much. You know, it's kind of baked into our DNA at this point. So
yeah, you don't even think, like, you don't even notice that you're doing it because it's just so, like, you know. Also, big thing to kind of point out here, and another great way to sort of do this is to always, not always, but like get familiar with the keys that involve the dots of the neck.
Yeah,
I don't know if you get this a lot, but a lot of times, like, they straight up like will ask, like, what do the dots mean? They're there for visual aid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, following the dot system is a wonderful way to get really, really good at those notes, because you just have a big neon sign just being like, I'm a C.
Yeah.
Like, so playing to the dots is super helpful too.
And on the same note, one thing that people often, for whatever reason, miss about the dots, I don't even know if I don't know when I figured this out. It was one of those, like, I was today years old when I realized this. The dots that are up here past the 12th fret coincide with the dots that are down here. So your 12th fret is the same note as your open string. That's why it gets the double dot. The first dot past the open string is the same note as the first dot past the double dot.
Isn't that wild?
I know. Like, nobody ever mentioned that to me. Like, either I was an idiot and didn't realize it, or I was a genius when I figured it out. Like, wow, I don't know which one.
Yeah.
So where that's really helpful is, let's say you're playing in G down here and you're playing that G minor pentatonic. You can take the same scale shape and you can play it just at that next dot past the 12th fret. So if I go, same, it's just an octave higher. That can be really handy if you want to do more of that. A lot of people, like, you know, we learn our minor pentatonic down here, and they want to go, how come it doesn't go? And that's just do that up there.
Just do the wham part.
I cannot possibly count how many times I've heard that. How come my guitar doesn't go? Okay, just gotta go up there.
Yeah, you got to go up higher.
That's it.
That's cool.
All right. We'll actually be done now. We'll actually stop. Except I'll put this down. If I don't put it down, I'll just keep playing notes.
That's right.
Yeah, and I've still got I got the rat here that you've been hearing for this whole time, and I could just sit and play this thing all day long. So,
I know.
And I will. Once we stop here, I will pick that up and continue to play. I'll probably continue to talk to the camera too. There just won't be anybody listening. Okay, guys. So that's it for this one. Like I said, stay tuned for future videos. I'm sure we'll have much more for you. You guys.
Bye.